Stay with me, because by the end of this night, one billionaire would lose his empire in front of the entire country. The slap cracked across the marble ballroom like a gunshot, sharp enough to silence every conversation beneath the crystal chandeliers of the Blackstone Charity Gala. Hundreds of wealthy guests froze mid-sip as Vivian Harper Collins slowly turned her face back toward her husband, one trembling hand resting protectively over her 7-month pregnant belly while shattered champagne glass glittered across the white floor like ice. Damien Royce Whitmore stood motionless in his custom black tuxedo, his expression cold, irritated, almost bored by what he had just done. The cameras were still rolling. Somewhere near the stage, a violinist stopped playing mid-note. The silence that followed felt heavier than the storm raging outside the Manhattan hotel windows. Vivian tasted blood at the corner of her mouth, metallic and warm, but she refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of them. Not in front of Vanessa Blake Monroe, whose red designer gown glowed beneath the ballroom lights like fresh paint spilled across snow. Vanessa stood beside Damien with one manicured hand wrapped possessively around his arm, her lips curling into the kind of smile women wore when they believed they had already won. Maybe next time, Vanessa said softly enough for only nearby guests to hear. You'll learn not to embarrass your husband in public. A ripple of uncomfortable whispers moved across the ballroom. Phones slowly began rising into the air. Someone near the back quietly muttered Damien's name in disbelief. The Whitmore family was New York royalty. Real estate towers. Political donations. Private jets lined up at Teterboro Airport. Damien had spent years building the image of a disciplined millionaire philanthropist, the kind of man magazines called untouchable. But tonight, under the gold lights of the Blackstone ballroom, the mask had slipped. Vivian lowered herself carefully to pick up her fallen clutch, her movements slow from the weight of pregnancy and humiliation pressing down on her shoulders at the same time. Her long blonde hair partially hid the redness, spreading across her cheek, but it could not hide the expression in her blue eyes anymore. Something had changed there. Something quiet. Dangerous. Damien noticed it immediately. Vivian, he warned under his breath, voice low and sharp, don't start. She looked up at him without fear for the first time in years. Around them, billionaires, investors, actresses, and politicians pretended not to stare while secretly watching every second unfold. Rain hammered the massive ballroom windows overlooking Central Park. Camera flashes flickered like lightning across the room. Then Vivian heard it, her phone vibrating inside her clutch. Once, twice, 3 times. Damien frowned. Turn it off. But Vivian slowly opened the message anyway. Her heartbeat stumbled the second she saw the sender. Nathaniel Reed Hayes. The only man Damien had forbidden her from ever speaking to again. Attached beneath the message was a single encrypted file. No greeting. No explanation. Just 7 words that made the blood drain from her husband's face the moment he accidentally caught them reflected in her phone screen. He stole everything from you. It's time. Damien's jaw tightened instantly. For the first time that night, real panic flickered behind his eyes. And standing in the center of the silent ballroom with one hand over her unborn child and the other gripping the phone that could destroy an empire, Vivian Harper Collins finally realized something important. The most dangerous woman in the room was no longer the mistress in red. It was the wife they had underestimated. The elevator ride to the penthouse lasted 43 seconds, but to Vivian Harper Collins it felt longer than the entire 7 years of her marriage. The mirrored walls reflected a woman she barely recognized anymore. Blonde hair carefully pinned into place. Diamond earrings Damien once bought after canceling their anniversary dinner. A pale blue maternity gown stretched gently around her stomach, where her daughter shifted restlessly beneath the fabric as if she could feel the tension wrapping around her mother like wire. Damien stood beside her scrolling through stock reports on his phone as though nothing unusual had happened downstairs. Not the slap, not the whispers, not the dozens of cameras capturing the moment from every angle. Vanessa leaned casually against the gold rail inside the elevator, applying lipstick using her phone camera while soft jazz played overhead. Social media is already exploding, she said with a smirk. You are trending, Vivian. Damien exhaled sharply without looking up. Handle it by morning. The elevator doors opened directly into the Whitmore penthouse overlooking Central Park. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Manhattan glowing beneath cold rain and ambulance lights somewhere far below the streets. The apartment smelled like polished wood, expensive candles, and silence. The kind of silence that only existed inside homes where people stopped loving each other years ago but stayed married for appearances. Vivian slowly removed her heels near the entrance, her swollen feet aching after hours of standing beneath ballroom lights pretending her life was perfect. Damien loosened his tie and poured himself a glass of bourbon without offering her water. He never did anymore. "You embarrassed me tonight," he said flatly, staring at the skyline instead of his wife. Vivian blinked slowly. "I embarrassed you. You forced a scene." His voice remained calm, controlled, almost rehearsed. "Investors were there. Board members. You know how important this quarter is." Vanessa wandered through the penthouse like she already owned it, fingertips gliding across marble countertops and designer furniture while humming softly under her breath. Vivian watched her stop beside the nursery door. The room had remained untouched for weeks. White crib, silver stars painted across the ceiling, boxes of unopened gifts stacked in corners beneath tissue paper. Vanessa tilted her head slightly. "Still going with the moon in clouds theme?" she asked casually. Vivian felt her stomach tighten. "Do not go in there." Vanessa smiled without turning around. "Relax. It is not like the baby can hear us yet." Damien said nothing. That silence hurt more than anything else. Vivian remembered when he used to assemble furniture beside her at 2 in the morning while laughing over instruction manuals, before the late-night meetings, before hidden hotel receipts, before Vanessa Blake Monroe appeared in every corner of their lives like smoke filling a locked room. Her phone vibrated again inside her clutch. Nathaniel Reed Hayes. Another encrypted message. Vivian discreetly lowered her eyes toward the screen while Damien walked toward his office. The message contained only a Zurich account number and one sentence beneath it. "Your father tried to warn you about him." Her breath caught instantly. Damien stopped halfway down the hallway, as though sensing something shift behind him. Slowly he turned back toward her. "Who keeps texting you?" The apartment suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. Rain struck the windows harder now, sharp against the glass like thrown gravel. Vivian looked at the screen again. Attached below the message was a file labeled Blackstone Holdings Internal Transfers. Hundreds of pages. Offshore accounts. Hidden transactions. Her pulse quickened beneath her skin. Damien took a step closer. "Vivian." For years she had feared that tone in his voice. Tonight something inside her finally stopped shrinking from it. She lifted her eyes toward her husband, calm and unreadable now, while Vanessa watched carefully from the nursery doorway. Then Damien saw the name at the top of the screen. Nathaniel Reed Hayes. The color drained from his face so fast even Vanessa noticed. And in that exact moment Vivian realized two things at once. Her husband had been hiding secrets worth millions of dollars. And somehow Nathaniel already knew every single one of them. Damien Whitmore crossed the penthouse in slow measured steps. But Vivian could already feel the shift in the air before he even reached her. The confidence was gone. For the first time in years, her husband looked uncertain. Rain rolled down the massive glass windows behind him, distorting the Manhattan skyline into streaks of silver and black, while thunder rumbled somewhere above the city like distant artillery. Vanessa straightened near the nursery doorway, suddenly paying very close attention. "Why is he contacting you?" Damien asked quietly. Vivian locked her phone screen before answering. "I thought you said Nathaniel Reed Hayes was irrelevant." Damien stopped 3 feet away from her, close enough for her to smell bourbon on his breath, close enough for her to see the tension tightening around his jaw. "I asked you a question." Vivian remembered the first time she met Damien Whitmore, 12 years earlier at a charity fundraiser in Boston. He had smiled like a movie star and shaken her father's hand like a future king. Back then, Vivian Harper Collins was not invisible. She was the daughter of Charles Collins, founder of Collins Global Capital, one of the largest private investment firms on the East Coast. Old money, quiet money, the kind of wealth that did not appear on reality television because it owned the networks instead. But after her father died unexpectedly from a heart condition 5 years ago, Vivian had stepped away from the business entirely. Grief hollowed her out slowly. Damien filled the silence. Or at least she believed he did. "Vivian." Damien's voice sharpened slightly. "What did Nathaniel send you?" She looked at him carefully now, seeing things she had ignored for years. The expensive watch bought with money she once trusted him to manage. The penthouse partially financed through Colin's family accounts she had signed without reading. The carefully rehearsed charm that disappeared whenever control slipped from his hands. Her daughter kicked softly beneath her ribs. Vivian rested a hand against her stomach and quietly sat down near the fireplace. "Do you remember what my father used to say about contracts?" Damien's expression darkened immediately. "This is not the time for nostalgia. He said the most dangerous signatures are the ones people make while they are in love." Silence. Heavy. Immediate. Vanessa slowly lowered herself onto the white leather couch nearby, suddenly no longer smiling. Damien stared at Vivian for several long seconds before forcing out a cold laugh. "You are emotional tonight." Vivian opened the encrypted file again. Page after page of financial transfers appeared across the screen. Offshore accounts in Zurich. Cayman Islands shell corporations. Luxury properties registered beneath false holding companies. Millions of dollars quietly moved through subsidiaries connected directly to Whitmore Development Group. Her breathing slowed as realization settled into her chest like ice water. Nathaniel had not sent suspicions. He had sent proof. "You stole from me," she whispered. Damien's face hardened instantly. "Careful. The Downtown Acquisition Fund. The Collins Trust accounts. The Blackstone Transfer Project." Her voice became steadier with every word. "You moved everything through foreign accounts." Vanessa looked sharply toward Damien now. What is she talking about? He ignored her completely. "You do not understand corporate structuring." Vivian almost smiled at that. For years, Damien had treated her like decoration. A pregnant wife in pastel dresses standing beside him at charity galas while men discussed billion-dollar deals over whiskey and cigars. He forgot she grew up inside boardrooms. He forgot Charles Collins taught her finance before she was old enough to drive. He forgot who she used to be before he convinced her to disappear. Her phone vibrated again. Another message from Nathaniel. This one contained a photograph taken only hours earlier. Damien entering a private bank in Midtown with two attorneys Vivian had never met. Beneath the image was a sentence that made her pulse stop for half a second. "Tomorrow morning, he transfers the final $80 million out of your family trust." Vivian slowly lifted her eyes toward her husband while thunder shook the windows behind him. And suddenly she understood why Damien had panicked downstairs the second he saw Nathaniel's name. This was never just an affair. It was a takeover. The penthouse had never sounded this quiet before. No music. No television. Only the steady ticking of the antique clock near the fireplace and the rain striking the glass 70 floors above Manhattan. Vivian Harper Collins sat perfectly still on the cream-colored sofa while the encrypted files glowed across her phone screen like evidence waiting inside a courtroom. Across from her, Damien Whitmore loosened the cuffs of his white dress shirt with slow, deliberate movements, trying to regain control one breath at a time. Vanessa Blake Monroe remained near the nursery doorway, but the confidence she carried earlier at the gala had begun to crack around the edges. "You are making assumptions based on documents you do not understand," Damien said calmly. "Nathaniel Reed Hayes has hated me for years. That man would fabricate anything." Vivian looked up slowly. "Why?" A flicker crossed Damien's eyes. Small. Fast. But she saw it. "Why what? Why does he hate you?" Vanessa folded her arms. "This is ridiculous. Damien, tell her the truth and end this already." He ignored her again. Vivian realized he had been doing that more often lately. Vanessa was useful to him, beautiful beside him, entertaining when he wanted admiration, but not important enough to trust completely. The only person Damien Whitmore had ever truly loved was himself. Vivian suddenly understood that with terrifying clarity. She rose carefully from the sofa and walked toward the kitchen island, one hand supporting the weight of her pregnant stomach while lightning briefly illuminated the city outside. Her reflection in the dark windows looked ghost-like now. Pale blonde hair, bare feet against marble floors. A woman standing inside a billion-dollar prison she unknowingly paid for herself. "My father trusted you," she said softly. Damien poured another drink. Charles Collins trusted results. He trusted family. Damien gave a humorless smile. "Your father trusted power." The sentence lingered heavily in the air. Vivian remembered family dinners from years ago. Charles Collins sitting at the head of the table with financial reports spread beside untouched steak and red wine, while Damien listened carefully to every lesson like a student desperate to impress the professor. Back then, Damien admired Charles, but admiration and envy often wore the same face. Her phone vibrated again. Another encrypted file arrived from Nathaniel. This time it was a voice recording. Vivian pressed play before Damien could stop her. The sound of his own voice immediately filled the penthouse speakers through Bluetooth connection. Once the Collins transfer clears, she becomes irrelevant. Silence exploded across the room. Damien's face lost all color. Vanessa turned sharply toward him. What transfer? Vivian stared at her husband while the recording continued. After the baby is born, the divorce settlement will be simple. Vivian signs whatever I put in front of her. The recording ended. Rain hammered the windows harder now, violent against the glass. Vanessa looked horrified for half a second before anger replaced it. You told me the trust money was already yours. Damien snapped toward her instantly. Enough. But it was too late. Vivian finally saw the full shape of the betrayal standing in front of her. Not just the affair. Not just humiliation. They had been planning her replacement together while quietly draining her family fortune behind closed doors. Vanessa stepped closer toward Vivian carefully now, her tone suddenly softer. Listen, sweetheart, men like Damien always protect themselves first. You cannot blame me for that. Vivian slowly turned toward her. For years, Vanessa mocked her online with subtle insults disguised as jokes, pitying smiles at charity events, whispers during galas. But tonight, Vivian noticed something new beneath the designer gown and perfect makeup. Fear. Vanessa was afraid too. Because if Damien had lied to Vivian for years, then he had lied to everyone else as well. Damien placed his glass down harder than intended against the marble counter. You are exhausted. Emotional. We will discuss this tomorrow. Vivian shook her head once. Calm. Controlled. No, she said quietly. Tomorrow morning you plan to move $80 million out of my family trust. Damien froze completely. Somewhere in the distance below them, police sirens echoed through Manhattan traffic. Then Vivian looked directly into her husband's eyes and asked the one question he clearly never expected her to ask. How long were you planning to leave me with nothing? Damien Whitmore did not answer immediately. He simply stared at Vivian HarperCollins across the glowing marble kitchen while thunder rolled over Manhattan and the city lights flickered against the rain-streaked windows. For years, silence had been one of his favorite weapons. He used it during arguments, during negotiations, during moments when he wanted other people to feel small enough to doubt themselves. But tonight the silence felt different. Heavy, fragile, dangerous. Vivian could almost hear the calculations happening behind his eyes. Vanessa Blake Monroe shifted uneasily near the nursery doorway, suddenly no longer interested in pretending this was merely a marital misunderstanding. You are overreacting, Damien finally said. The trust transfers were temporary asset protections. Vivian laughed softly for the first time that night, and the sound unsettled everyone in the room. You moved money through shell corporations in 3 countries. Damien took a slow breath. That is how international finance works. No, Vivian replied quietly. That is how theft works. The room fell silent again. Somewhere behind them, the espresso machine automatically powered down with a soft mechanical click. The sound echoed strangely through the penthouse. Vivian remembered when she used to wake at 5 every morning to make Damien coffee before investor meetings because he claimed nobody understood his schedule except her. She remembered waiting through lonely dinners, pregnancy appointments attended alone, nights spent staring at the Manhattan skyline wondering when exactly her marriage had transformed into performance art for magazines and charity galas. And now she knew the answer. It happened the moment Damien realized her grief made her easier to control. Her phone vibrated once more against the marble counter. Nathaniel. Vivian hesitated before opening the newest file. Damien noticed instantly. Do not. His voice came sharper this time. Colder. Afraid. Vivian ignored him. A video file opened across the screen. Security footage. Blackstone Private Bank. Timestamped earlier that afternoon. Damien entered a conference room alongside 2 attorneys and a financial advisor Vivian recognized from her father's old firm. The footage had no audio, but Nathaniel included transcript notes beneath it. Transfer the final Collins assets before Monday. Once the baby arrives, Vivian will not fight anything. Vivian stopped breathing for a second. Her daughter shifted hard beneath her ribs as if reacting to the sudden tension flooding her body. Vanessa stared openly at Damien now. You said she already signed everything. Damien's patience finally cracked. Enough, Vanessa. No, Vanessa snapped back. You told me the divorce would already be finalized by Christmas. Vivian slowly looked between them. Two people who believed they were manipulating each other, realizing too late that neither of them fully understood the game. Damien walked toward Vivian carefully now, lowering his voice into the controlled tone he used with investors and reporters. Listen to me. Nathaniel Reed Hayes wants revenge because I outbid him on the Hudson redevelopment deal 3 years ago. He has been obsessed ever since. Vivian narrowed her eyes slightly. Then why does he have access to your private bank meetings? Damien said nothing. That was answer enough. Rain continued hammering the windows while lightning illuminated the dark nursery behind Vanessa. Tiny silver stars painted across the ceiling glowed softly each time the sky flashed white. Vivian suddenly realized she did not want her daughter growing up inside this apartment. Inside this silence. Inside this kind of marriage where love became leverage and trust became paperwork. Nathaniel's final message appeared seconds later. Only one sentence this time. Meet me tomorrow at 9:30 before he moves the money. Damien saw the message appear in real time. Panic crossed his face instantly before disappearing beneath forced calm. You are not meeting him. Vivian slowly locked her phone screen and slipped it into her clutch. Then she lifted her eyes toward the man who spent years convincing her she was powerless without him. You do not decide that anymore. And for the first time since Damien Whitmore entered her life, he looked at his wife like he finally understood she might become the one thing money could not control. Vivian HarperCollins did not sleep that night. At 3:17 in the morning, she stood barefoot beside the penthouse windows wrapped in a cream cashmere robe, while Manhattan glowed beneath cold rain and ambulance lights drifting through the streets below like ghosts. Behind her, the apartment remained silent except for the distant hum of the climate system and the occasional vibration of Damien Whitmore's phone from inside his office. He had locked himself in there nearly 2 hours earlier after a tense whispered call with someone named Victor Langley from Blackstone Private Bank. Vivian memorized every word she overheard through the partially closed door. Move everything before market open. No delays. I will handle Vivian. Handle Vivian. The phrase repeated inside her head like poison. Her daughter shifted softly beneath her ribs as she walked toward the nursery and slowly pushed the door open. Moonlight spilled across the untouched crib and silver-painted ceiling stars, while folded baby blankets rested neatly in drawers she organized herself months earlier when she still believed this child would grow up surrounded by love. Vivian touched the edge of the crib carefully and suddenly remembered something her father once told her during a thunderstorm when she was 12 years old. The moment someone profits from your silence, they will do everything possible to keep you quiet. Back then she thought he was talking about business. Now she understood he was talking about survival. Her phone lit up again. Nathaniel. No greeting. No unnecessary words. Just an address in Lower Manhattan and one sentence beneath it. Bring every document you can access before he notices they are missing. Vivian stared at the message for several seconds before quietly crossing the hallway toward Damien's office. The door remained slightly open. Inside, Damien had fallen asleep on the leather couch with his tie loosened and one arm draped across his eyes, while financial reports covered the glass coffee table beside him. Even sleeping, he looked exhausted, cornered, older somehow. For a brief moment, Vivian almost remembered the man she once loved. The ambitious young developer who danced barefoot with her in their first apartment while eating takeout Chinese food directly from cartons because they could not afford dining furniture yet. Then she saw the open folder beside his laptop. Blackstone Final Authorization. Her heartbeat slowed instantly. Vivian stepped inside carefully, the soft carpet muffling her footsteps while thunder rolled beyond the windows. She opened the folder with trembling hands. Offshore account numbers. Asset transfer schedules. Legal drafts prepared for divorce proceedings she had never seen before. One document made her stomach drop completely. Preliminary custody recommendation. Damien intended to portray Vivian as emotionally unstable after childbirth in order to secure control of the child and the remaining Collins assets connected to her inheritance. Vivian covered her mouth to stop herself from making a sound. He was planning everything. The affair. The transfers. The divorce. even her future as a mother. Her phone camera silently captured page after page while Damien slept only feet away. The soft clicking sound felt deafening inside the dark office. Then Damien shifted slightly on the couch. Vivian froze instantly, but he did not wake up. She kept photographing documents until her phone storage warning appeared across the screen. At exactly 4:12 in the morning, another message arrived from Nathaniel. There is one thing you still do not know. Attached beneath it was a photograph taken 6 years earlier outside Collins' global capital headquarters. Damien stood shaking hands with Nathaniel Reed Hayes beside Charles Collins himself. All three men smiling directly at the camera. Vivian frowned immediately. Damien told her they barely knew each other. Another message appeared seconds later. Your husband did not destroy my business, Vivian. Her pulse quickened. Then the final sentence arrived. He destroyed your father first. Vivian slowly lifted her eyes toward Damien, sleeping peacefully beneath dim office lights, while rain continued striking the windows high above Manhattan. And suddenly the betrayal no longer felt like greed. It felt personal. By 7:45 the next morning, Manhattan looked washed clean by the storm. Rainwater still clung to sidewalks and taxi roofs while steam curled upward from subway vents beneath pale gray skies. Vivian Harper Collins sat silently in the back of a black SUV, moving through lower Manhattan traffic with one hand resting protectively over her stomach and the other gripping the leather folder containing hundreds of photographs she copied from Damien Whitmore's office only hours earlier. Her heart had not slowed down once since dawn. Every red light felt dangerous. Every unknown number flashing across her phone screen made her pulse jump. Damien had already called 12 times. She ignored every single one. Nathaniel Reed Hayes chose a private financial law office 3 blocks from Wall Street. No company logos outside. No reception desk visible from the street. Just dark glass doors and a retired Marine standing beside the entrance wearing an earpiece beneath his collar. The man opened the SUV door without speaking. Ms. Collins, he said quietly. Mr. Hayes is waiting upstairs. Vivian stepped carefully onto the wet pavement, the cold morning air hitting her face like reality finally arriving all at once. Across the street, giant digital billboards flashed stock prices and luxury advertisements, while businessmen hurried through crosswalks carrying coffee and umbrellas, completely unaware that one of New York's most powerful real estate empires was already beginning to collapse from the inside. The elevator opened directly into a private conference floor wrapped in dark oak and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River. Nathaniel Reed Hayes stood near the glass with his back turned when Vivian entered. Tall, broad shoulders, navy suit without a tie. The calm stillness of someone who had spent years learning how to survive pressure without showing fear. He turned slowly as she approached. His eyes immediately dropped toward the bruise still faintly visible along Vivian's cheek from the gala. Something cold moved behind his expression before disappearing just as fast. You should not have stayed there after last night, he said quietly. Vivian set the leather folder onto the conference table. You said Damien destroyed my father. Nathaniel looked at the folder but did not open it immediately. Sit down first. Tell me the truth. The room fell silent except for distant ferry horns echoing from the river below. Nathaniel finally pulled a thin file from beside his laptop and slid it slowly across the table toward her. Charles Collins' internal review. Vivian frowned instantly. What is this? Your father opened a private investigation 8 months before he died. Vivian stared at him without blinking. Nathaniel's voice remained calm, controlled, almost painfully careful. Charles Collins believed someone inside Whitmore Development was manipulating market valuations using confidential information from Collins' global capital. Vivian's chest tightened. Damien. Nathaniel nodded once. Your father confronted him privately. The room suddenly felt smaller, warmer, harder to breathe inside. No, Vivian whispered automatically. My father trusted him. At first. Nathaniel opened the investigation file slowly. Financial timelines. Internal emails. Property acquisitions tied directly to Whitmore Development. Millions of dollars earned through suspicious transactions that somehow always benefited Damien at the exact right moment. Charles planned to remove Damien from the company permanently. Vivian covered her mouth with trembling fingers. Then why did he not? Nathaniel's eyes darkened slightly. Because 3 weeks later your father suffered a fatal heart episode before the board meeting ever happened. Silence slammed into the room. Vivian heard her own heartbeat pounding inside her ears while Manhattan traffic drifted faintly 30 stories below them. You think Damien caused it? Nathaniel took a slow breath. I think your father discovered something powerful enough to scare him. Vivian looked down at the investigation file again. Her father's handwritten notes filled the margins beside transaction reports. One sentence circled heavily in black ink stopped her cold. Do not trust Damien with Vivian's future. Tears blurred her vision instantly. Nathaniel leaned forward slightly. Vivian. She shook her head once, trying to steady herself while her daughter moved beneath her ribs, as if sensing the storm building around them again. All these years, she whispered. He kept telling me my father believed in him. Nathaniel's expression hardened. No, he said quietly. Your father was trying to protect you from him. The first headline appeared at 11:12 that morning. Whitmore development stock falls after charity gala incident. By noon, the video had already spread across every major social media platform in the country. Millions of people watched the same 7-second clip on repeat. Damien Whitmore standing beneath crystal chandeliers. Vivian HarperCollins protecting her pregnant stomach. The sharp sound echoing through the ballroom. The silence afterward. Financial commentators called it a public relations disaster. Online audiences called it something else entirely. The slap heard across Manhattan. Vivian stared at the television mounted inside Nathaniel Reed Hayes' private conference office, while legal teams moved rapidly around them carrying folders, tablets, and coffee cups. Every screen displayed Damien's face. Every news channel debated the collapse unfolding in real time. Outside the conference room glass walls, lawyers whispered urgently into phones while stock numbers bled red across market monitors. Whitmore development had already dropped 14% since opening bell, and it was getting worse by the minute. Nathaniel handed Vivian a cup of tea before sitting beside her at the long oak table. The transfer freeze has been filed with federal regulators, he said quietly. Damien cannot move the Collins assets now. Vivian wrapped both hands around the warm cup without drinking. She had not fully stopped shaking since reading her father's investigation notes earlier that morning. Across the room, one of Nathaniel's attorneys connected a laptop to the main screen. You need to see this, she said carefully. Surveillance footage appeared instantly. Blackstone Private Bank. Underground parking garage. Timestamp 2 hours earlier. Damien Whitmore exiting his vehicle beside Victor Langley and 2 federal financial investigators waiting near the elevators. Vivian frowned immediately. Federal investigators? Nathaniel nodded slowly. The Securities and Exchange Commission opened a preliminary inquiry 3 months ago after anonymous reports tied Whitmore development to offshore laundering channels. Vivian looked toward him sharply. Anonymous. Nathaniel held her gaze for a long second. Your father started documenting everything before he died. I finished what he could not. The room went silent except for the faint hum of traffic beyond the windows. Vivian suddenly realized Nathaniel had spent years quietly watching Damien build an empire using stolen foundations while waiting for the exact moment enough evidence existed to finally bring him down. Her phone began vibrating nonstop across the table. Unknown reporters, financial networks, social media alerts arriving every few seconds. Then one notification froze her completely. Vanessa Blake Monroe posted a public statement 30 seconds earlier. Vivian opened it instantly. I had no knowledge of any financial misconduct involving Damien Whitmore, and I fully support Vivian Collins during this difficult time. Vivian stared at the screen in disbelief. Nathaniel gave a cold, humorless laugh. Interesting timing. Another notification appeared seconds later. Exclusive video leaked from Blackstone Gala reaches 20 million views in 4 hours. The internet was no longer discussing market numbers. They were discussing Vivian. Her silence, her expression after the gala, her pregnancy. Thousands of comments flooded every platform defending her, while old interviews resurfaced showing Damien dismissing her publicly for years. America loved a glamorous billionaire story, but it loved a fallen billionaire even more. One of Nathaniel's legal analysts suddenly looked up from his laptop. Sir, the room tightened instantly. We have a problem. Nathaniel stood immediately. What is it? The analyst turned the screen toward them. Airport security footage filled the monitor. Damien Whitmore walking quickly through a private terminal at Teterboro Airport, carrying only one black duffel bag, while Victor Langley followed close behind. Departure scheduled in 42 minutes. Destination, Zurich. Vivian's heartbeat stumbled hard inside her chest. He is running. Nathaniel's expression darkened instantly as he reached for his phone. No, he said quietly. He is trying to save whatever he still can. Then he looked directly at Vivian HarperCollins while sirens suddenly echoed from the streets below Wall Street. But if federal agents reach that airport before takeoff, Nathaniel said, Damien Whitmore's empire ends today. The private jet never left the runway. At 12:51 in the afternoon, federal vehicles surrounded the terminal at Teterboro Airport, while news helicopters circled overhead like vultures above open water. By 1:05, every major network in America carried the same breaking headline across glowing red banners. Federal investigation targets Whitmore Development CEO. Inside Nathaniel Reed Hayes' conference office, nobody spoke as live footage filled the television screens mounted across the wall. Damien Whitmore emerged from the terminal entrance wearing the same navy overcoat from the gala the night before, but he no longer looked untouchable. No security team. No polished smile for cameras. No carefully rehearsed confidence. Just a man standing beneath flashing lights while federal agents escorted Victor Langley toward a black SUV nearby. Vivian HarperCollins watched silently from the edge of the conference table with one hand resting over her stomach where her daughter moved softly beneath her cream-colored dress. The room smelled like coffee, printer ink, and rain drifting through the slightly open balcony doors overlooking the Hudson River. Nathaniel stood beside her without speaking. On television, reporters shouted questions over one another while cameras flashed non-stop against the wet airport pavement. Mr. Whitmore, did you illegally transfer Collins' family assets? Did your wife cooperate with investigators? Are you fleeing the country? Damien said nothing at first. Then suddenly he stopped walking. The cameras surged closer instantly. For one brief second his eyes lifted toward the nearest lens, and Vivian felt something strange twist inside her chest because she recognized the expression immediately. Fear. Real fear. Not anger. Not arrogance. Fear. The same man who once controlled boardrooms with a single glance now looked like someone trying desperately to outrun consequences, moving faster than money. Her phone buzzed against the table. A message from Vanessa Blake Monroe. I never knew how far he would go. I am sorry. Vivian stared at the screen for several long seconds before quietly locking the phone again without replying. Nathaniel noticed. No response. Vivian shook her head once. Some people only apologize after the cameras arrive. Nathaniel almost smiled at that. Outside the conference room windows, Wall Street continued moving beneath gray afternoon skies while traders, lawyers, and journalists flooded sidewalks chasing the biggest financial scandal New York had seen in years. Online, the gala footage had passed 40 million views. Commentators called Vivian a symbol of quiet resilience. Morning talk shows replayed her expression after the slap frame by frame, while legal analysts discussed how Whitmore Development could collapse entirely before the week ended. But Vivian barely heard any of it anymore. Her attention remained fixed on the television as Damien finally disappeared into the back of a federal vehicle beneath flashing lights and falling rain. The door shut. The convoy pulled away. Just like that, the empire was gone. 6 months later, the first snow of December drifted softly across Manhattan streets while Christmas lights reflected against frozen sidewalks outside Collins' global capital headquarters. The company name stretched across the glass tower entrance in silver letters restored for the first time since Charles Collins died. Inside the executive office overlooking Central Park, Vivian HarperCollins gently rocked her newborn daughter beside the windows while soft piano music played through hidden speakers. Her little girl slept peacefully wrapped in a white cashmere blanket embroidered with silver stars matching the nursery ceiling from months earlier. But this time the room no longer felt like a prison. Nathaniel Reed Hayes stood nearby reviewing financial reports before quietly setting them aside. The board approved everything unanimously this morning, he said. The company is officially yours. Vivian looked out across the city her father once built piece by piece and finally allowed herself to breathe fully again. Down below, people hurried through snow carrying shopping bags and coffee cups beneath glowing holiday lights, completely unaware of how close she once came to losing everything. Nathaniel carefully lifted the sleeping baby into his arms while Vivian watched them together in the soft winter light. Peaceful, safe, real. Thousands of miles away inside a federal correctional facility in Pennsylvania, Damien Whitmore reportedly spent most evenings alone in the prison library after losing nearly every remaining asset tied to the investigation. No cameras followed him there anymore. No investors returned his calls. No empire remained to protect him. And standing quietly beside the window while snow fell across Manhattan, Vivian finally understood something her father tried to teach her long ago. Some men spend their entire lives building towers tall enough to look powerful, only to discover too late that the strongest woman in the room was the one they mistook for weak.